Segment 10 Nikud Shalosh Nikud Aleph. Ledaber Shalom La'avadecha. Ledaber Shalom La'avadecha. The interactive skill that this segment will focus on involves identifying and affirming a positive trait that's integral to a particular person's character in the hopes that he or she will then respond, take action, with a corresponding beneficial behavior. We see the king of Nineveh taking this course of action when he draws attention to one of God's traits as someone who speaks, or more specifically, someone who is responsive to those who reach out to him. So he says, Ano ta'aneh, you surely will answer. He's confident that this is part of God's character. Aware of this trait, that God is responsive, the king then proceeds to indicate what sort of speech or response he hopes that God will issue. God is one who speaks or responds, and he hopes that God will say or respond in the following way, namely, Ledaber Shalom, to speak peace. Here is the complete bicolon, cell 1 line bait, Ano ta'aneh bechastecha et tefilati. Ledaber Shalom la'avadecha. Now there are two other points in the king's prayer where he takes the initial step, that is, identifying one of God's positive traits, but he stops short of the second step, namely identifying a beneficial action which he hopes that God would therefore perform. The first is in cell 1, line dalet, Tzur ata. The second is in cell 2, line beit, Rachum ata. Your task is to help the king expand these two monocola into bicola. Do it in such a way so that in each case the second colon, that is the one which you will be generating, will identify a beneficial action that in some way will correspond, will flow from the divine trait named by the king in the first line of that bicolon. Thus, in the case of cell 1, line dalet, the beneficial action should flow out of God's trait as being solid, a rock. And the beneficial action for the second should flow out of God's trait as rachum, compassionate. In order to strengthen our grasp of PL forms, you're being asked in this particular activity to include within each benefit or purpose statement, that is the monocolon that you're generating, include within that a PL infinitive construct. This has been done in the sample bicolon above. So in the expression Ledaber Shalom La'avadecha, Ledaber is a PL infinitive construct. You may find it helpful to refer to the collection of PL infinitives construct that you'll find toward the end of this activity. Here are the two bicolon completion exercises. Both of them come from the current Jonah episode. The first from cell 1, line dalet, colon aleph reads, Tzur ata lechol chosevach. The second comes from cell 2, line beit. The first colon of this reads, Rachum ata lechol ma'asecha. Please begin by giving a translation of the monocolon that's been provided. Write it in the column on the left. Then proceed to compose another monocolon and let it include a PL infinitive construct. Here is that collection of infinitives construct in the PL binyan. As you look them over, you will find that the morphology, that is the characteristic spelling distinguishing these forms, displays the typical dagesh that we've come to expect in the middle radical of the PL. That is, whenever possible, and there are some weak letters which will resist that dagesh. Typically, etzere follows that second consonant. And before it, that is, following the first consonant, typically we will find a patach vowel. All these elements are seen in the sample form ledaber. Patach after the first radical dalet, dagesh in the second, beit, followed by a tsere. Let's read over these sample PL infinitives construct. We'll be reading down the columns. Levachesh, levarech, legalot, ledaber, lechasot, lechaper, lelamed, lemale, lenase, la'anot, letzavot, lekadesh, lekavot, leromem, lerachem, leshalach. Once again, these are presented as infinitives construct. Let's turn now to the appendix in order to see how infinitives absolute are spelled. You'll quickly notice that most of them are spelled the same as their corresponding infinitive construct. We will, however, notice a distinct spelling for the infinitives absolute in the case of weak verbs, particularly those that are third yod-he. Let's look now to the corresponding appendix entry. Here's the appendix entry for Eser Nikud Shalosh Nikud Aleph. The collection you see before you consists of the same shorashim as in the previous display, only now we're presenting infinitives absolute. In the case of strong verbs, the spelling will be indistinguishable from the spelling you saw in the previous page, but in the case of weak verbs, such as third yod-he, for example, you'll find that the infinitive absolute uses a distinct spelling for the Piel Binyan. Let's read over this collection again, reading down the columns. Bakesh, barech, galeh, daber, kaseh. Notice that in the case of infinitive construct, this would have been kasot, kaper, lamed, malo, naso, ane, tzaveh, kadesh, kaveh, romem, rachem, shaleach.